Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Loose Framing Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me,
Jesse Brock. Hello.
Jesse.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Chill in the air. You can smell Christmas cookies. I'm lying. It's like 90 degrees. Oh, Florida Christmas.
It's the holiday cheer, though.
It is the holiday cheer, which we tried to dress
Spirit of the
up.
season.
So for those who are not watching us on YouTube, why don't we describe what we're wearing right now?
If you've seen the meme with the angry lady and she's pointing and the cat is reacting like, who are you talking to? We're wearing those shirts.
Yes.
But we'll let you guess which one of us is wearing which shirt.
Because this meme was outdated 2 years ago, and we're still...
Well, the shirts are about 2 years old.
They are. We had to dig up something Christmassy. So here we are. But welcome, everybody. We got a really great show coming up, which we'll talk about here in a second.
Rich Roddman is a colorist and a DIT.
Yep. And
digital
also,
imaging technician.
Also
I learned
a very, very competent editor. Been doing the job for 30 plus years.
Yeah. And I took away so much from this conversation that y'all are about to hear, just about keeping things organized, the importance of knowing what your next step is. And he also does mentorship. He's doing a program at HCC, and I think that that's so valuable to just instill like the importance of organization and getting that hands-on experience before you even graduate. I mean, is so just rare in this industry nowadays, and really, really great for our community.
We'll get into more in the interview, but it's a great opportunity for students working in the Tampa Bay area.
Did you have an apprenticeship when you got into the industry?
I did not have an apprenticeship. I just sort of started in the industry, but I think the industry itself, so film is naturally mentorship based.
Yeah.
So even when you're starting out, you're still going to find a path to whatever it is you want to do, and there's people along the way that help you. I will say, for those that have been watching, not necessarily our podcast or our Spotlight series, but our newsletter going back months ago, we highlighted Carrie and Coco Bermudez from Movie Groovy. And when I first moved to Tampa Bay, I had been working in Savannah for years, but the first person who hired me when I moved to Tampa Bay, and this is like 2007-ish, was Carrie and Coco.
Yeah.
So I started working with them on I think it was either a Sweet Bay or a Publix commercial. I can't remember which. But they needed a location manager, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that, even though I've never been to Tampa Bay. So
what was that like? Kind of like getting your hands dirty, and were you just asking a million questions?
It was fun.
Probably pretty daunting, though.
It was actually. No, I'll tell you what it was. It was for a Florida Lotto commercial.
Okay.
And they wanted to shoot it in a actual working grocery store, and they could not get anyone from corporate to call them back. So I got a last minute call. It's like, hey, if you can do this, like, we'll keep hiring you. Like, figure it out. And I had like half a day to lock a grocery store, and I can't just go to a general manager and say, hey, can we shoot here? Because there's a whole corporate structure behind it. So I tried calling the general manager and CFO, PIO, public information officer for I think it was Sweet Bay at the time. Couldn't get anyone on the phone, of course, because all I get is a receptionist who knows to tell me no. Like, that's her job, is to be the gatekeeper and say no to everything. Mm-hmm. So I called, it's a true story, called loss prevention, trying to make a claim that I had like identity theft or fraud.
Oh,
and
my God.
When someone finally picked up, I was like, oh, I was talking with so-and-so, whoever the CEO was. I don't know how I got transferred to you. Can you transfer me back? And the person didn't know any better. I'm like, oh, sure, no problem. And sure enough, they connected me to the actual person's desk, superseding the normal structure. I didn't have to go to the receptionist or his administrative assistant, like just right to him, and he picked up.
Yeah.
And 20 minutes later, I had the location locked. So
wow, that is some serious like problem-solving skills.
Or lying.
But also just like, I mean, you kind of, manipulate to get answers sometimes, and that's just the nature of any business.
Sure.
But just to have the confidence to do that when it was your very first gig, I mean, that's something that I think, you either have that or it's kind of.
Well, it wasn't my first gig. It was my first gig in Tampa Bay.
Gotcha. Okay. But still, like, new community, you didn't know anybody, but you were just like, you know what? I'm going in.
Sink or swim.
110%.
All right. Well, with that, we got a great show coming up. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back in a second with Rich Roddman. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to Loose Framing Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me now, Rich Roddman. How are you, Rich?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming in. So you are a DIT, colorist, and a longtime editor, over 30 years of experience. Mm-hmm. Let's set the stage here for our audience. I think a lot of people understand what an editor is, but they might not know what a DIT is or what a colorist is. So let's talk about a DIT first. Explain what that role is.
Okay. A DIT stands for a digital imaging technician. And the best way to understand that position is when we used to shoot everything on film and we'd send the film out to the film lab to be processed. Well, that's what the DIT does. It basically does all the processing there on set, taking the media from the cameras, making sure there's multiple copies of it, because in the digital world it can disappear in a blink of an eye. Checking the quality, checking for sound, and then doing the process to start it for editing.
Yeah. We'll get to what a colorist is here in a second, but I don't know if people really appreciate the importance of a DIT on set. I mean, you're spending tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to capture something on film, and yet it all funnels through one person,
right,
to make sure that is processed and logged correctly. There's some redundancies in place. That's a lot of pressure. How did you find yourself in that role?
Well, it was interesting. It literally starts back to when the Red 1 camera first came on set. Prior to that, everything was being shot onto tape. As Reds became more popular, they'd go out on set and people just did not understand the workflow. So I was having to go out on set to help the DPs manage, make sure the color was right and do all that. And it literally developed out of just being there and handling that situation.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the whole industry, that's pretty much how it started as well.
And I think DITs are pretty ubiquitous now on most sets, especially if they're shooting digital. You have to have someone on set to manage the media. Is that a very specialized sector of the industry? Are there a lot of people that do what you do?
Well, they've just added a new role in the unions for they have a role for DIT, but they've added another role for a data manager. So you can basically break it down, a DIT, into three separate parts. You've got a data manager, which is just responsible for downloading, and that's all they do is handle the media, make sure there's multiple copies, and that everything is safe. You have a DIT, which can create dailies and sync sound and put looks that the DP or the director wants as you're processing your dailies. But then there's another stage of a DIT which does live grading, which happens a lot in episodics, where you're constantly making adjustments to the camera as you're going through the scene so that this scene will match this scene. And that information is being captured and saved so that it can be added to the dailies in a later process. So one's where you're active with the DP all the time. One is when you're more behind the scene. And then the data manager is just downloading and making sure everything has a copy for the end of the day.
Yeah. And let's shift real quick to color grading. That's another thing that you've been doing for years. In fact, you're a certified colorist.
Yes.
The only one in our market, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
For Tampa Bay. How important is color grading, and what is the actual process of what you do?
A lot of people don't realize what color grading actually can bring to their project. It's almost, you have to show them to see. Because they're looking at, what the camera shot and what the edit has, and they're thinking this is fine. But once you do a color pass where you get to adjust the lighting and the saturation and the black levels, and you get the shots that camera A was shot on Monday and camera B's angle was shot on Tuesday, and you can actually match those frames so that when you're watching, you actually think everything was taking place at the exact same time. You put all those subtleties, you put a look in, you can actually build emotion and feeling through color and brightness and darkness. All of that adds to the quality of your image and the ability to tell your story. And when people see that, they can't unsee it. And that's something that they just have to put into their process.
Yeah. And I think coloring is super important. And I think that the problem with a lot of people who are not part of the industry, haven't been in the industry very long, they're so used to looking at what they're recording with their cell phone, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of back end stuff going on with the cell phone. It's basically color grading for you as best it can, or
yes,
the Instagram filters, whatever. But when you're shooting in most digital cameras, you're shooting raw. It's a very flat, compressed image. Mm-hmm. You can do some things with some LUTs or lookup tables to stylize it a little bit, but you're basically getting a raw, flat image that on its own does not look great. The framing's there, the performance is there, but it's not how the director or the DP intended it to look.
Right.
That has to come through post.
Right. What the reason the cameras, the professional end cameras, you like to shoot in a log format or a raw format. What happens is the codec that we're recording to can only handle so much information. With these sensors that we have, they capture so much dynamic range. It actually, what log does is actually write an algorithm to compress the image that the codec can handle. And then we have the reverse algorithm to expand it back in the post world. And so actually, I think someone, I remember reading over there, Rec 709 will handle this such information. A log version of that same shot will contain 800% more information than just shooting it in Rec 709.
Yeah.
So just to throw all that information away on set is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I also don't know if people fully appreciate just how color grading affects their emotions and the tone of a scene. Depending on how you're coloring an image, it can make you feel sad, it can make you feel happy, it can depress an environment, it can uplift an environment.
I was doing a seminar at one point, and I took a shot from a film of the hero of the thing. He was just standing in the hallway, and it was a log piece that I color graded, where I used warm tones and brightened his face and a little shine in his eye and all this stuff. And I looked at the audience and I said, "Would you trust this person?" And they're like, "Absolutely." It just made you feel comfortable. I then took that same shot and I pushed blues into the blacks, and I put a little green into his flesh tone, and I darkened the eyes a little bit. And I said, "Would you trust this person?" They're like, "No way. He looks like he's going to mug me." It was the exact same shot.
Yeah.
So just by affecting the colors, you play upon the viewer's own individual expectations and emotions so they are making an opinion just on what they're seeing, even before the person says a single word. And that's the power color really has. You can really set the stage to have people in the right frame of mind, the right feeling before anything even happens.
Yeah, let's bring in editing into this as well. It goes back to the old idea of the Kuleshov experience, right? Like, depending on what you juxtapose an image or an edit with, it can change how a person perceived the previous scene. Show someone eating a bowl of cereal, and you cut to someone, at a funeral, it makes the person at the table eating cereal seem a lot more depressed, right? Like maybe they were contemplating whatever the next scene was, or it could be something cheerful. People, I think, sometimes can reduce editors or colorists down to button pushers or monkeys. And they're not. They are as collaborative of a storyteller as the director or the DP or the writer is.
Correct.
Talk to us about the creative expression you're able to find through editing and coloring.
Well, it comes back to being the storyteller. I always laugh because, you go out and you're on set and you're shooting for weeks, or months sometimes. And at the end, everybody has a rap part and they're all done. I'm like, no, this is not done. This is just beginning. You have to take all of that footage and you find those amazing takes and you find all those magic moments that they've captured. And then you, as an editor, you are stringing them together to bring out the best story that's there. And it's all about the pacing. It's all about having the ability to show and tell the story that the director wants to get across, along with the emotion. When I start to edit something, I'll look at a person and the first question I ask them is like, what do you want someone to feel when they're done watching this? It's not what you want them to remember. It's like, what do you want them to feel? Because that emotion is going to bring up the memory of these visuals that they're seeing. Every time that emotion hits, these visuals should come back to their mind.
Yeah. And how, it's obviously different depending on what director you're working with, but what kind of collaborative relationship do you like to have with a director when you're going through the editing process?
I talk to the directors as much almost even before shooting if I can, to try and understand their thought process and how there is. Learning to get set up a dialogue, because there's a lot of terms people use that, particularly if you're coloring, it's like, I need more bang in this picture. It needs to pop more. It needs to do this. It's like, all right, what's the button for pop? Or what's the button? It's like, how do what exactly are they asking for? But once you learn a person, you get to see what it is they're liking or not liking. And actually, some of my clients, I don't even have to. I can just look at their face as they're watching, and I'll see if this is working or it's not working or something like that. And you can develop those kind of relationships so that you can work effectively together to bring out the best possible story.
Yeah. Depending on what editing program or software you're using, at the end of the day, it can all be reduced down to a tool.
Correct.
I started out editing on a Steenbeck, and then I moved to a Media 100, and then now, all these years later, I don't even know what people are using. How has that transition from editing program to editing program affected your ability to edit and tell a story? Does the advancements in technology inhibit you, or is it always like an incremental step forward and giving you new tools to edit with?
I think I learned back when I first walked into an edit suite, you needed 5 people to run the edit. You needed a sound mixer, you needed someone to work on the switcher. As a technical director, you need a video engineer, you needed a tape deck operator, and then there was the director telling everybody what to do. And you literally had to be the tape deck operator, your fingers had to be wide enough to be able to hit the play button and the record settings on the AB deck and the recorder at the same time to start the edit to be able to happen. And you'd rehearse it like 6 times, and then you'd actually do the roll. So every edit you made, you had to be sure that that's what you did, because if you were 10 shots in and you had to replace shot 2, you had to go rebuild the entire thing from shot 2 on. Yeah. It's not like a nonlinear editing system today where you can just swap things around with no problem. I liked having to learn that way because I now think through my edits. I'm doing this because this is going to set up this and this. It makes it more streamlined, and it makes me think about 3 or 4 different possible ways to tell it before I figure out, right, no, that's the way we need to go. As opposed to having 5 different timelines active saying, all right, which one of these do you like the best? And it's just inefficiency of working that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if people realize just the organization that goes into editing and how that is the foundation to edit.
Yep.
Make the process smooth. I remember back when, I started out on film, and, you had an actual trim bin. It was an actual bin, and you hung your clips over it. And then Final Cut 7 comes out, and all of a sudden, okay, yeah, there's a trim bin. And people who started out editing earlier understood the terminology and the need for organization. If you're working off of a work print and you cut 2 scenes, and now you don't know where the hell the film went, you can't go back to the master without having to jump through a ton of hoops.
Exactly.
And now it's just so easy to re-import footage, reconnect footage. Do you think editors have become lazier as a result? And I don't mean that as a pejorative, but maybe they don't realize the importance of starting with organization early on.
Well, I think part of that goes back to how people define themselves as editors these days. Back when you and I both started, these edit suites were $500,000 to $1 million. So not anybody's walking in to just do this stuff. Now you can buy a laptop and a $200, $300 piece of software and call yourself an editor.
Yeah.
And you can find all these videos on YouTube to teach you how to use this software and be able to do that. But that doesn't teach you how to be organized. It doesn't teach you how to think the process through, because you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. I tell people all the time that I start them as assistant editors, and they don't even realize, because they want to edit. They're like, I just want to show you my skills. It's like, as an assistant editor, you have to prep all this stuff and do all this stuff. And there are careers in LA where people are assistant editors their entire lives because that's what they want to do. And it's all about setting up in the organization and do that. And when you have a good skill at that, you will work as long as you want to work, because they will always hire you to do that.
Yep.
Again, it's just because it's a lost skill. If you don't know how to prep your footage so that you can find something, particularly today when directors don't understand the word of cut. It's all digital media, so they just let it roll and do all this stuff, and you have to be able to find these clips. That could be 6 or 7 minutes into a 12-minute clip is the thing you're looking for. So you're going to sit and watch the first 6 minutes of a clip hoping to find something. Yeah. If you don't know how to mark it and subclip and do use the metadata to find your material, you're completely lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I got into Avid, and this was years ago, having to reconnect your OMF media files, and you had to know where things were at just to make the thing function.
Exactly.
And I think that sometimes can be lost. Let's move off on a tangent here. You're talking about young editors. This is an industry more than I think just about any other industry I can think of that still relies upon mentorship as a means to get people into the industry, to advance them to different stages in their career. How did you start off? Who was your mentor? And then we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing to mentor people who want to be editors now.
The beginning of my career, I got lucky. I was at a school, and I was in college, and they had I forget the proper term of it, where this gentleman was our teacher, but he was working in the industry. He was teaching it part time, and after I had done my senior project, he took me aside and he says, there's a job opening at my company that's being about 6 to 9 months. You'd have to leave school, so don't tell anybody because I could lose my job for this. But you have to leave school, and then when this project's done, you can come back and finish your degree. So of course, I jumped at it. I signed out of classes and I went and did that job, and that was 33 years ago. And I haven't. I've been fortunate that I haven't had it just jumped from job to job to job. And this allows it's again you get in there, you find the people that know what they're doing, you learn from them, you watch them, you observe how problems, and then you have to pay attention. You never stop learning in this job because technology is always changing. I like to tell people the only thing that doesn't change in this job is the fact that everything is going to change. Yeah. And literally, there is not a thing that I use today that was even invented when I first started in this business. So you had to learn it constantly.
Yeah. And we're just talking regionally now in the Tampa Bay area. You've brought an incredible opportunity to students at the Hillsborough Community College. Right now they're working on, or have been working on, a documentary with Andy Garcia. Yep.
I've been fortunate to team with Semcor Studios, who works with Andy Garcia, and we're working on this documentary called Stonebreaker. And this gives us the opportunity, particularly in this remote environment that we've had to live in these last few years, or last year or so. We're teaching these students at this community college. We're teaching them how to work in DaVinci Resolve, how to edit a real film of a documentary that's been shot over the past 7 years with 9 terabytes of interviews and that. And they're learning how to edit and do basic setups, and they're starting to compile scenes together. The director lives in LA, so we're using online streaming technology. So he's watching what they're doing, commenting, they're making back and making changes. And this is real world understanding. So when these kids actually graduate, they not only will they be able to say that they have this experience, they can walk into a place and probably teach other people how to start doing proper procedure because they've had this experience and the opportunity.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So going back to your own start, you were in college, you had an opportunity to work on a real professional project, and you had to leave college to do that. And I'm sure that was meaningful. It helped launch your career, helped instill the interest to continue on with your learning. You're bringing that right now to HCC, but in a different way. So you're having the students not having to leave the classroom environment. You're bringing real world experience to the classroom. How is that different? How is that helping the students?
Well, we're taking advantage of, over this whole pandemic that we've just come through, or still going through, the ability for remote technology. And we've capitalized on that, and we're allowing the students to work literally from their own house if they choose to. We're accessing online technology and cloud-based technology so they can get their footage, they can do the edits following the notes that they're provided, and put the results back online where the director in LA can see their results and give them direct feedback. So they're having the experience of having that kind of workflow. And then we meet once a week online on a Zoom meeting just to talk about, they're making sure that they don't have any issues or any technical things that pop up or stuff like that. So once you give them, they have the base knowledge of how to do the actual editing with the software. We just set them off and let them go and working at their own pace, and they're saying, this is what it's like to be a professional. There's not somebody telling you, all right, you've got 10 minutes to do this or something like that. You are responsible for your own pace. These are the deadlines you have to meet because there's always a deadline-driven business that we're in. And they are succeeding like you wouldn't believe. And I love the fact, this is a community college. These people are don't usually have those kind of opportunities presented to us. It's reserved for film schools or expensive 4-year schools or stuff like that. And they're going to graduate with not only the experience and the knowledge, but literally the fact that can show, like, look, this is a feature film that we've produced by Andy Garcia that we were made a reality.
Yeah. That's just an incredible opportunity for these students. And, just on a personal level, thank you for bringing something like that to Hillsborough County.
Well, I mean, I think this business has lost the sight of an apprenticeship. And being able to, I've been doing this a very long time. And when I take the time and I try to find people who are starting off in this business who have heart and have drive, and you know that if you invest time in them and teach them, they're going to continue. It's not like they're going to work in a couple of years and then go, quit this and do something else for a living. This is what their passion is. And I try to take the time to help them and learn the tasks to make them have successful careers. And the only thing I ask is that, all right, when you're 20 years into this career, you find somebody like you and do it for them. Because that's how the information just gets passed on. And that's how I know good stories are going to be able to be told decades and decades from now, because the people with the passion will have the opportunity to tell those stories.
Yeah. No, that's so important. And I'm not trivializing, the collegiate experience or any sort of secondary
No, not
education.
at all. It's not a knock on that. It's like, it's the opportunity for people, for storytellers to find a way to tell those stories.
But no, that's so important. I feel like too often universities are locked into whatever technology they have on hand at the moment.
Correct.
Right. So if they've invested in Avid, students are going to walk out of there knowing how to use Avid. But it doesn't necessarily mean, unless they went on their own initiative, they learned how to use Premiere or Final Cut or Resolve or something else. Same thing with cameras. Whatever the camera they have in the camera cage at a university, that's what you're learning on. There's nothing wrong with that. But having a mentorship structure and actually working on professional projects is going to expose you to so many different types of personalities, different types of projects, but also technologies.
Correct.
And this is an industry where, as you said at the beginning, the only thing that's certain is that things are going to change.
Right. The other thing it exposes them to is what realistic expectations are. Living in a educational environment, there's a lot of give and flow, and everything's for a grade, to try and show success. That does not exist in the real world. So when you leave that and come into a real world environment, it's quite a little bit of a culture shock. This is exposing them to what the expectations are and how to deliver on those expectations so that they can perform at peak levels.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the advancements in technology. It was HD, and then it was 2K, 4K, ultra high definition. Where are we going in the next 5 years? How is that going to change fundamentally what you do?
Well, as I see it, we've got 3 types of tsunamis all coming at us. We're all experiencing the Ultra HD, upgrade bump. Everyone has a 4K TV in their living rooms now. But it's still 4K television that is in the same color space as HD and the same brightness as HD has been. One of the things that these modern professional cameras do is offering us the ability, the sensors can record in a high dynamic range. So what we've been used to looking at 8 stops of dynamic range our whole lives, these cameras are capturing 18 stops, 16 to 18 stops depending on the camera. So the TVs just haven't been able to show that to us. But with this next realm of technology, they will be able to show us all of that dynamic range. So we're going to be able to see things that we've never seen before. On top of that is also the change in what's called a color space. We've had a color space which has been pretty contained. There's a lot of colors that the TV set that we see with our eyes that the TV set just can't reproduce. Well, we're now we have the science and technology, the color technology, to actually start to expand that by several 100%, so that we'll be able to see larger pictures in these 4K environments with much brighter and more contrasty imagery with colors that have never been able to see before. So it's literally going to change this whole experience of television, of watching something. And that doesn't matter if it's on your 70-inch TV at home or on your iPad, because you're going to be able to see things that visually have never been able to be shown before.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, both from a workflow standpoint and editing, but also just in a practical sense on a set, right? You can get away with jankier costumes if you know the resolution's not there and it's going to look okay on camera. You can hide things in shadows thinking it's going to be crushed and you're not going to see it. I can't tell you how many old films I've gone back and seen on an HDTV, and it's like, oh no, there's the boom. You went back to an old tube TV, you couldn't have seen that because it just didn't have the range to see it. So this is going to fundamentally change how people both, use costumes in the frame, what props look like, and also just makeup, like things that you can get away with in the past, you're not going to be able to get away with anymore. I think it's going to raise the game of everyone on set.
Absolutely. Everyone's going to have to adjust to, because if you don't, it loses the magic.
Yeah.
Once you take somebody out of the scene and they're now realize they're watching, they're not in the story anymore, it's done. It's like, all right, why continue?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's just an anecdote you had mentioned, and thinking about this new space where just capturing the media and handling that media is going to become more and more important, and the workflow potentially harder and harder as you move up from 4K, 5K, 8K, 16K, God forbid. What is that like on set? How do you actually juggle and manage all of these various drives? What are people fundamentally doing wrong in how they're capturing their media and archiving their media?
Well, the first mistake I see a lot of people make is they don't have enough copies. In the digital world, for an example, we had a client come here from San Francisco and they were shooting their commercial. And they brought a client drive and an agency drive, or the editor's drive. And then as a DIT, I was keeping a third copy, which is something I tend to do. And so they took the one drive and they shipped it UPS. When we were wrapped, they shipped the one drive UPS back to San Francisco. And then the director took the other drive. And while he was editing on the plane, he disconnected the drive without ejecting it properly. So when he gets back and he hands the drive to the editor, it doesn't work. It wants to reformat. And so that drive is now gone. Everything on it is gone. Well, we got UPS coming. The UPS they lost the drive. So they just flew back to San Francisco and didn't have anything. They call me and they're like, is there any chance we can get the cards that we shot with or something like that? So I've got a copy of everything. I keep it for like 2 weeks just as a safety for such cases. They were like, what do we need to do? And I'm like, we worked, it's like, we can just, we took care of it, made it nice and simple. So they still had that third copy. It's a digital world where, like I said, one small mistake and everything you've done is history. So you have to make sure that everything, you've got copies. And as a DIT, we say, if there's not 3 copies of it, it doesn't exist. Just think of it as it doesn't exist. So people tend to try to save things on hard drives. They think my project is done, I save it on this hard drive, and they stick it in a drawer or a desk somewhere, and they just leave it there. They don't understand the technology of the hard drive, realizing that if the drive doesn't have electricity flowing to it, after 9 or 10 months, the magnetic parts of that drive that's holding your information start to decay because it's designed to have electricity keeping that maintained. So when they go to pull that drive out 2 years from now to show you this great thing they shot back then, the footage is decayed and is now corrupt and won't show. So they don't understand how to properly archive some of these great footages. And we're capturing with our iPhones and cameras and things like that, we're capturing so much more media than we ever have before in the past, that there are amazing moments being captured that are going to be lost if they're not taken care of. And people need to understand how to take care of this footage so that it survives for people to see, generations from now.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's why we still have films that are 115 years old.
Exactly.
Because celluloid, as far as we know, as long as it's correct and a proper environment, we don't know what the expiration date on celluloid is yet. We haven't hit that yet, as long as it's in a good environment.
Right. The archive, the salt mines in Utah that are archives for all data, there's only 2 formats they accept. archival film, which is a film designed just for archiving, and LTO cartridges, LTO tape, which is a digital tape environment, which currently holds about 12 terabytes per tape, and it's like $80 for a cartridge. So you've got 12, which is even cheaper than hard drives. That has a 30-year shelf life. So you can, if you have an interview with a once in a lifetime or something like that, or footage that, remarkable stuff that you need to make, it has to be maintained, that is an option that you need to take and make sure that that footage can survive for generations.
Yeah. And, that also goes just to legacy devices too. I mean, I still have lacy drives sitting around that, were the old 400 connectors or 600s or 800s or whatever. Now it's the, Thunderbolt. 5 years from now, the Thunderbolt won't exist.
No, it'll be something else. Yeah, exactly.
It'll be something else. And then how do you source a legacy system that can even read those drives? God forbid they even work.
Right.
And I'm also old enough to remember old mechanical drives. And those things would break constantly.
You remember the old zip drives?
Oh, yeah.
Just like, I found one in a drawer one day, and I'm just like, well, I don't know what's on this. So it's like...
It was, for those that don't know what a zip drive was, it was like a fat floppy disk.
Right.
That's the only way to describe it.
Like 100 megabytes, which was like amazing at the
Or,
time.
you have an old digibaited tape laying around. Like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not going to find someone at least
3/4 inch.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the future of your role and how it may have been changed by the pandemic. So you mentioned that the students you're working with right now are working remotely. We just had a feature film that shot here not too long ago. We were talking to the directors, and they were like, we've never met our editor in person. Mm-hmm. We've been having this very close relationship, but through Zoom and Skype or wherever. Do you think that's where the industry's heading, where it's going to be more compartmentalized and more virtual in how you're interacting with productions?
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic forced our industry to get into this remote workflow, where the technology was just there in time to be able to actually do it. And there were bugs that need to be worked out, or actually more just workflows, not even bugs. It was workflows for efficiency that just needed to be worked out and figured out. And we have that now. We understand how this works, and we're not going to go back. Once everything's back to what's normal, post-production was never going to go back to what it was pre-pandemic. There's just no reason to it. I mean, the technology is there where you can put a Teradek cube on your camera that when you hit cut, it's going to encode something and use cellular technology to send it to the cloud, where your editor sitting in some other city somewhere will have it show up on his timeline. So by the time you're finished shooting the scene, he's already got it cut, a rough cut for you, for the director to sit back and watch on his laptop while, you guys are setting up for the next scene. That is a reality that is possible if somebody wants to use that as a workflow. And, with timelines, becoming shorter and shorter, you can literally have your picture, a final cut or a locked version of your picture days after you wrap. And again, as we all know, time is money in this industry. I don't see how that's not going to be. People are not going to be moving to that more and more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was reading an interview with another director just a couple days ago, talking about how you'd have to have your picture locked months in advance of its theatrical release. Mm-hmm. And they were actually, in this particular case, making changes a day and a half before the actual theatrical release date, and they were able to push out essentially a hardware update or a software update to the DCPs that had already gone out.
Exactly.
And when they were downloading the handshaking code to make the DCPs work, or digital cinema print for those that are not aware, it had the new scenes that
already put in there
right there. It was amazing. Which is I mean, you'd hope that you'd have your picture locked before then,
but
I think it's going to give people a chance to change and massage and put more care into their product without that rush. We have a release date.
I think a lot of people don't understand the whole true post. I think it's of editing, and they think, we'll just edit the piece and we're done. They don't understand the sound design and mixing. They don't understand the color. And what a lot of people don't understand is the deliverables. Yeah. having to have what you need to have for deliverables to get your project onto the Netflix platforms, onto the Amazon platforms, and things like that. It's a whole, I don't want to say a can of worms, because it's easy. It's doable. It's not easy to do, but it's you have to go through a progression that is set up and is strict because it makes sure that everything is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, early in the beginning years of Netflix, I remember watching a movie streaming where an hour into the movie, I saw a red clip of media not found in the middle of the picture. And
Or
I'm like,
a blank frame because they didn't.
Yeah. I'm like, how did this get by quality control?
Yeah.
I mean, that is like a stab in the heart to like every editor. That's their worst nightmare, is that after final delivery, something was not online. That has to be fun. People are in such rush nowadays that editors don't watch their outputs before they upload them and send them to a client. It's like, yeah, you saw it on your timeline, but do you know how it rendered? You didn't watch your render to make sure that all your pieces there, or that even rendered properly, and you just render it. I literally watched somebody render something and send it and not even open it. And I'm like, you don't even know what you just sent. You could have rendered a wrong timeline or an old timeline or something like that. How do you know? It comes back to just a discipline that you have to have. Don't always be in such a rush.
Yeah.
Have a good process so that you can, check yourself to make sure that you're not going to look like, you look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's shocking that I would assume at least a well-budgeted project as offline media in their final render. But I think it's even more true in the independent world where you've invested, let's say it's a $500,000 project, right? Mm-hmm. And you've probably leveraged every favor and every financial dollar you've had available to make that. And then you get to the end of the process and you're trying to distribute your film and you don't have the materials to actually meet their deliverable minimums, and you can't pass quality control. And now you have a very expensive home video. Exactly. That you're either going to have to go back and find a way to get those deliverables or you're screwed.
Yeah. You've wasted all this money and time. And I know people who have put their life savings, have put mortgages on their house to try and get these passion projects done. And they don't understand that final step to get it out there. They think it's just going to be, someone's going to say, oh, we'll take this.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works. And that's one of those separations of being professional versus people who think they understand what's happening.
Yeah. And that's also true for audio too. If it's not mixed correctly, if it's, you don't have the audio stems, if it's not in a position to be able to take closed captioning, like there's places just will say no, sorry.
Absolutely. Right off the bat.
Yep. Which is just crushing if you're a filmmaker. But it's things that you hope they learn along the way and they adjust in those lessons. So we're coming up to the end of our podcast here, Rich. Let's end with some good advice for people that want to start off in your world. They want to be an editor. They're passionate about color grading. Maybe they just really like project management and downloading footage. Maybe that's their passion. Where is a good place to start? And what are some of the pitfalls you've seen or you've experienced yourself that you'd advise against?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the more, obviously people with passion, they're just going to be moving forward, Find multiple sources for collecting information. I always like to equate editing is like cooking. It depends on the ingredients you have in, how long you have to take to use it, and what your final delivery is going to be. I like to, when I'm talking to people for the first time working on projects, it's like, all right, we can make mac and cheese, or we can make a 14-course Thanksgiving meal. What is it that the people are expecting on their end? Because you don't want to show up with a Thanksgiving meal if you're just watching a movie on a Friday night, and don't show up to a Thanksgiving dinner only with mac and cheese, because it's not going to work either way. Understand who your audience is and what you're trying to deliver to. The best advice to be is think backwards. Where am I going? What am I showing this to? Who's going to be watching this? Who's the goal to be watching this? And then work your way back of how to get to that point. So you have a direction. You're not walking around aimlessly.
Yeah.
Because if you start editing a project, I started a timeline of 1080 and I'm shooting it in 30 frames a second and I'm doing all this other stuff, but my deliverable is 4K and 2398, then everything I've done here is completely useless. You have to know where you're going.
Yeah. It's just fantastic advice. So with that, let's wrap it up. But I do want to give you a chance to plug where people can learn more about you. Where can they find you? How could they hire you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is silverboxstudios.com. You can find me on Instagram at rrodman. And by all means, if you have any questions or coloring, or if you do want to know, there's some great books that I'm drawing a blank on the titles right now, or things like that to get you, whether you want to be as a DIT or you want to get into editing or that. There's some excellent websites that really go into, specifically if you're trying to be an editor or as a colorist and stuff like that, will teach you, or not teach you what the buttons actually do, but teach your brain of what you're looking for. Because that's what it is. It's not, like you say, you can work on any software you want to. There's always 6 different ways to do something, but it's understanding, why do I need contrast here, or why do I need to adjust color here, or what this particular effect is doing.
Yeah.
That's what you need to learn to be able to tell the story. It's not what button on the machine to push to do it.
Yeah. All right. And with that, we'll make sure we have all that information in the description of the podcast. But with that, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy
Merry
New
Christmas
Year.
to you as well, yeah.
Appreciate you hanging out with us on the couch
Hopefully
for a little
2020 is going to be an amazing year.
2022.
2022, yeah.
If I get a second chance at 2020, I'd take it.
I'm hoping for it. It's just that revisionist history.
It has to be. And with that, people, we will be right back to wrap out this segment. Thanks for following along. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. That was a great interview. What did you think, Jesse?
Honestly, yes. I mean, probably one of my most favorite interviews I've probably ever heard. And I listened to quite a few. So I took away so much from it. This is the first time that we've interviewed a DIT, colorist, editor, and just a lot of good nuggets of information.
We've been playing with color a lot. For a lot shorter amount of time than we have just editing in general, right? Color came in with Wizard of Oz, but we've been editing films for years prior to that. And there's a reason why editors edit the way they do, because there is, in fact, a universal language that no matter who you are, what your experience is, what your culture is, you still understand what's going on, right? That's why you need an establishing shot, shot, reverse shot,
right.
Things like this. But there's also an emotionality that is inherent in visual storytelling that also goes towards coloring as well, where we are sort of ingrained as human beings to respond certain ways to certain colors. Mm-hmm. That's why, you don't paint a room red or yellow unless you're trying to excite a person, right? If you're trying to make a calm environment, those are not colors to use. And that's certainly true in film. So I think that was a really interesting conversation we had with him. And it's something that it's very subliminal. People don't really realize how they're being manipulated constantly when they're watching
there
products.
are certain auteurs, directors that are very well known for having a specific style, like a Scorsese or a Burton or a Wes Anderson, where they have like specific color palettes, and the color is kind of what makes their brand, What's your favorite? Like out of all of the...
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I am actually not a huge fan of Wes Anderson. I think he fits nicely in a certain type of box, but doesn't stretch himself a lot.
But he kind of established his style.
Sure, but
using those
sometimes
palettes.
you want to break that style. But
100%.
I think like Denis Villeneuve is amazing. I'm super excited. I've just watched Dune, which is fantastic. It could be one of my favorite films of all time.
Wow.
And it's just got a color palette that is unique to him. He hasn't made enough movies, I think, to be called a true auteur yet, because we just don't have that catalog of films to look back on. But there's certainly a style and a way he goes about color grading and finding ways to pop colors or to be subtle in different areas that is unique to him. It's amazing.
Yeah. And color's so important. Speaking of the holidays, the #1 Christmas movie of all time, according to Vulture.com, is It's a Wonderful Life.
Is it the color version or the black and white version?
That's what I'm saying. It's a Wonderful Life. But they don't specify which version. But you've watched both, right?
I have.
And it's different.
Well,
which one do you prefer?
Here's the thing. I don't actually like the movie at all. But I remember the black and white version. And I do not remember the color version, even though I've seen them both.
Right.
And that could be because it's actually been proven that we retain more information in black and white than we do in color. But I also think just on an emotional level, there's more of a nostalgia with the movie that I relate to with the black and white version, whereas the color version just seems kind of, I don't know, cheap to me.
Black and white's very nostalgic and very classic feeling, especially for Christmas movies. Miracle on 34th Street, same idea.
Which speaking of Christmas movies, a great segue. We asked our Instagram followers.
Yes, we did.
To list their favorite holiday movies.
Yeah. So first we'll start with what Vulture.com said are the top 3 of all time.
Okay.
And I'll let you guess.
I'm supposed to guess?
Yeah, guess what the top 3 movies like holiday classics of all time are.
Well, you said It's a Wonderful Life was on there. So
yeah, number 1.
I think Christmas Vacation and Charlie Brown's Christmas.
Number 2 is Elf.
Elf?
Number 3 is Home Alone.
Oh.
I think it's Home Alone 2, right? Isn't it Home Alone 2, Lost in New York? Is the Christmas one?
No, they're both in Christmas. In fact, I think that's the whole premise of the Home
is that
Alone
it's
series.
Christmas
It's always Christmas.
Okay.
I'm very disappointed in you, Vulture.com. In fact, whoever voted on that, I'm disappointed in you as human beings. Like you that's the movies you pick?
That's according one source, all right? There's multiple sources, but that's Vulture.com. That's the most recent one.
We will not be going back to Vulture.com anytime soon. With that said,
but
though,
according to our audience...
what is our fan base actually say?
Fan base, I'm going to pull out a couple. We asked them a very tough question. Between Jim Carrey's How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Elf, 67% voted for Elf.
All right, I stand corrected.
Yeah, it's a popular movie.
Will Ferrell just grinds my teeth, man. Something about him just
That's what Will, our sound editor for the podcast, he was like, well, yeah, that's a classic matchup. That's 2 of the top comedians, like going head to head. And I'm like, well, clearly... one's more popular.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm disappointed in that one too. So let's move on.
All right. It's a Wonderful Life beat out Christmas Carol. 65% voted for It's a Wonderful Life. Now this one is a little surprising for me because Polar Express versus Nightmare Before Christmas, literally a 50-50 split.
What?
I know. I thought Nightmare Before Christmas had like this cult following that like... and it's Burton, and it's the music.
The Elfman, yeah.
And it's a 50-50 split. Yeah, over 100 people voted on this.
That's
crazy.
I'm very surprised by that.
And then we have like our like non-traditional. So we've got Die Hard versus Edward Scissorhands.
Die Hard wins all day long.
Die Hard wins, but barely at 53%.
But is Edward Scissorhands even a Christmas movie?
According to Vulture.com.
I will argue that Die Hard is a Christmas movie because the plot would be different if it was not Christmas, right? They're attending a Christmas party. He uses Christmas implements to kill off some of the bad guys.
All right, I don't know either of these movies' plots by heart. Okay. But I think Edward Scissorhands doesn't have like snow and...
Well, if snow makes Christmas, then there's a whole lot of movies we could include in this.
There's a snowman in one scene, I think.
And there probably is.
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, but Die Hard wins. Thank you, Internet.
Christmas Vacation versus White Christmas.
Christmas Vacation.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry for the one follower we had who was mad that I didn't list White Christmas. And so I was like, all right, White Christmas versus Christmas Vacation. Not one single person voted for White Christmas.
Yeah, that could have just been a tough pairing, though.
And then we have the romantic. This is what we're going to end with. The romantic classics, which are Love Actually and The Holiday.
Okay. I've seen neither of those films.
Love Actually wins.
Yeah.
56%. Love
I
Actually
do know
great.
That's like everyone I know, like, oh, I always watch this around Christmas, Love Actually.
I feel
I've never
like,
seen it.
Honestly, it's Bill Nighy singing, and he's just like this like washed up pop star, and it's so funny.
He's playing like a Keith Richards, right?
Exactly. That's exactly who he's emulating. Yeah, it's very, very funny. I say you give it a shot.
All right, maybe I'll watch it this Christmas. But what was the other one it was against?
It was against The Holiday, which was
what is
with...
that?
It's with Jude Law,
Okay.
Cameron Diaz, Kate Winslet, and Jack Black. Kate Winslet and Jack Black are actually love interests.
All right.
It's one of the very few, like, Jack Black plays a romantic lead in it, and it was very good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that film.
You have some watching to do over your Christmas break.
Maybe not this Christmas. All right. Well, thank you, Instagram, for proving
Yes.
at least a couple of my theories correct. Some of those are kind of questionable, though. I think you might want to expand your Christmas holiday viewing, please.
Yes.
There's some good. Why didn't we mention Gremlins, for Christ's sake?
I didn't mention all of them. We mentioned quite a few.
Yeah.
Gremlins was in there with Krampus. We
Kra-
also were yelled at for not including Krampus.
Krampus is a great film.
Is that a Christmas
Yeah.
movie? Yes.
Well,
Did I include it?
No. Fair. All right. Well, watch more Christmas films.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And with that, I think we're closing out
Yeah.
our year.
Yes.
So this is it for 2021.
Yep. On to 2022.
And God help us if it's not
Bigger,
better.
better, brighter.
Yeah. Bigger, better, brighter. I like that. That's a good way to end. All right. Well, from Film Tampa Bay, we wish all of you a bigger, brighter 2022. Happy holidays from the both of us.
Yes.
Jesse
Happy
Brock.
holidays.
Where can they find more of us?
Follow us on social media at Film Tampa Bay, and you can watch us Loose Framing Podcast. You can watch us on YouTube or listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
All right. And with that, see you in 2022.